I can't remember if I ever said this in my long sleep-deprived videos about my drop list, but the hardest part about doing these Mal videos is that, like, aside from having strep throat and sounding like shit, is that every time I look at a show, I have to then, like, completely recall what the fuck that show is, then recall what my opinion of that show is, and there's, like, no breathing room because I just jump right into the next one. I mean, I could potentially stop for a second and read it and, like, think about it and then edit the video, but then I'd have to edit the video, and we can't have that. Not on this type of content, baby. All right, do da da da. This is a show I was a big fan of. I had never liked it as much as Bakano. Good lord, my fucking throat. I was never as into Do Da 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 as I had been into Bakano because I feel like it's structurally a lot weaker. Um, Part of the strength of Bakano is the way it weaved all the different storylines into one 13 episode tale that has this awesome four-way climax at the end, whereas then there was the 3 episode OVA which just kind of adapted the next book, and that's why it felt weird and kind of weak. Durarara has that problem where even though it's bouncing between all these different characters and there's a lot going on, it's still like three distinct arcs, and oftentimes the build-up period isn't as engaging as it was in Bakano. Plus, the story just doesn't have as many, it doesn't feel as justified. Like, in Bakano, there was, like, kind of one central gimmick, which is this, like, there's immortals, and then there's people who are just crazy. Da-da-da-da, there's the headless rider. There's a guy who's just extremely strong because, like, I don't know, something happened to him. And then a bunch of weirdos around that. And, like, I don't know, it just never felt as tight to me. But it does have a really great cast of characters who really grow on you as the show goes along. I think that it benefits from the fact that it was much longer than Bakano. You really get to know these characters and get to know the scenario, and it, like, actually fucking ends because there were, like, 4 seasons of it. The other seasons aren't as good as the original because it gets really fucking weird, but it's still pretty entertaining all the way through, and I think the characters are very endearing. And it has some great moments. Like, the climax of the first arc in particular is, like, a really big fucking deal. I would say that first arc is, like, good enough that you almost don't have to watch the rest. The rest is still fun, but, like, that's the, like, really great part of it. I'd probably give Da 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 an 8 if I watched it today. Because I know I enjoyed it more than the other seasons, and I gave those all, like, a 6 and 7. Dance in the Vampire Bund. This was one of the last, like, really Shinbo-driven shows from Studio Shaft, which even this one, I don't think he's credited as the lead director, but, like, you can fucking tell it's him. The imagery is, like, his fucking shit. But it's really interesting. It's one that it's a manga adaptation, but they changed a lot in the anime. They definitely, like, made it more cinematic and sort of streamlined and focused, but also added in some stuff that was maybe unnecessary. It's a show that, like, has, like, really good moments and then a lot of kind of weird shit, but I don't think the story is ever interesting. Like, the cool moments are more because of the cinematography and directing than the actual storyline. So, like, it's kind of cool as, like, a gothic horror inspired thing that's, like, fun to watch for the aesthetic, but I don't find the story all that memorable, and it kind of feels truncated since the manga is, like, a much longer thing that really goes in a lot more directions. Still pretty interesting, though. It has some weird ideas, and I appreciate it. Kuchu Buranko, also known as Trapeze. This is a great show. It's sort of an artsy, experimental show from director, oh my god, I can't remember his fucking name. He's the same guy who did Gatchaman Crowds and fucking See, The Money of Soul and Possibility Control, and Mononoke. Everything he does is a really different art style, but usually on a budget. That's the funny thing about his shows. Is that they'll be, like, really out there visually, but, like, it's kind of covering up the fact that there's maybe not a lot of money behind it, at least most of the time. Especially in this case. Kuju Buranko, out of all the, like, episodic anthology story shows, this is probably my favorite, because it's a feel-good show about a bunch of people with personality disorders. Basically, every episode, someone with a personality disorder has to go to this psychological clinic and seek treatment. and by the end they kind of get themselves out of their hole, and it ends with this fucking awesome ending theme by Denki Groove called Shangri-La. Highly recommend listening to it. It just ends every episode on such an upbeat note that, like, watching this show is just the ultimate feel-good experience. And it's also very real, very, like, adult. It has a deep understanding of psychology and kind of treats it seriously, even though it's kind of a fun, goofy show. I just like it a lot. I'd probably give it an 8. Sora no Oto. This was my favorite show of 2010, back in 2010. That was the year K-On! Season 2 came out, and I scored this above that at the time. Because it's a show with a really gorgeous and unique setting. It's about this girl who joins the military, and she's part of a military music group. Basically, they are meant to, like, perform the signals and stuff for the armies and shit, like, you know, all the trumpet lines and shit like that. But there's not really a war happening right now in the place where they're stationed, so it's mostly about them, like, hanging out in this weird, like, European town and just having a fun time. It's sort of a slice of life show, but it's really fun and comfy and gorgeous to look at, and has a strong sense of drama underlying everything, which kind of becomes more pronounced in the later episodes. I don't remember enjoying the later episodes as much as the early ones. I felt like as the show got more dramatic, it lost a little bit of appeal for me. But then again, I watched this in 2010, back when I thought plot was dumb. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I might like the show more if I watched it now. I'll probably give it an 8 out of 10. I remember, like, you know, I was quite into it, but I don't remember too much about it. So I don't know if it's like, you know, if it would hold up as well to my memory of it, which was like a 10 out of 10 at the time. Working. I hate Working. I hate this anime series, and I've seen 2 fucking seasons of it. I really liked the Working manga. It was originally a 4-koma. It's just kind of average, but I like the characters. I hated the way the pacing felt in the anime series. I felt all the jokes were off time. I felt like they tried to over-animate some scenes, and, like, it made it not funny, because, like, they tried to make the joke how animated it was. Kind of like what Nichijou did, except Nichijou did it well, and Working did it badly. And just, I don't know, it got really repetitive really fast. I can't stand watching it, but I was watching it with my little brother, and we ended up watching 2 whole seasons. I'd probably give it, like, a 5 out of 10. Like, it's not an offensive show. It just makes me mad because I felt like there was so much potential with these characters to be a really funny series, and I liked the 4-koma, but the anime just kind of botched the execution to me. Senko no Night Raid. This show is a snore fest. This was from when A1 Pictures was trying to do interesting things, as was the next show on this list, when they did The Power of Anime, which Sora no Oto was the first Power of Anime series they did, followed by Occult Academy and or Night Raid and Occult Academy, in that order. And then I think they were supposed to do a 4th one, but they never did. So these all came out in the same year, and it was when A1 Pictures was actually, like, when they first started, they were trying to be, like, the interesting anime company. Problem is that there was a lot of swing and misses. Night Raid is an interesting show. It takes place in, like, the 30s, and it's about, like, a government spy group or something like that. During, like, the Manchuria debacle, I don't know enough about this historical event to, like, really go into detail, but the thing is, it's like a political thriller, but it's really fucking slow. It's really slow and really boring, and there's a few episodes early on that have a spark of interest, and it's really pretty to look at, but as it goes and it develops more of an ongoing story, it gets really stupid, and by the end, I just didn't care anymore. I was like, I don't know what this is anymore. I'd probably give it, like, a 5, maybe a 4. I don't remember, like, how dumb or boring it is, so yeah, it might just be a 4. Then we have Occult Academy, and this one was actually kind of fascinating, because this one gets really odd. It's almost another Bathos show, like another show with really odd tone shifts, because it starts off as kind of a ghost hunting comedy series with beautiful animation and some really interesting characters. But it's not really going anywhere in the early episodes. It kind of feels like a almost Scooby-Doo mystery, but for grown-ups kind of thing. It's really interesting. But then it sort of starts going between like some more melodramatic episodes that don't work. There's some like Iyashikei-ish episodes that don't work. The midsection of the show just gets weird, and it's like very hit or miss. Like literally there'll be a good episode and a bad episode, but neither is exceptional. But then the last two episodes go into this like suddenly way over the top ending that I personally loved. So yeah, I don't know. I'd probably give it like a 6 overall. It's an interesting show. I can definitely say it's worth a look, even if it's not necessarily great. Especially for the crazy ass ending. If you just like to see stuff that goes like, that just gives up on making sense and goes crazy at the end, then that's a good example of that. Oh God, I really sound like garbage. This is the last recording I'm going to do while I'm sick, I promise. I didn't realize my voice had gotten this bad in the couple of hours since the last recording. Ichiban Ushiro no Daimao. This is one of the better harem light novel shows. It's like, the main character is like the demon lord or whatever, who gives a fuck, and there's all these girls, and they're like, one's a robot, and some of them have powers. It's like an arc structure kind of thing. I don't remember much about it. It's racy. It's a fan service show. I just remember that it's one that didn't annoy me. I think I probably gave it like a 6. It's probably like a strong 5 to a light 6 kind of show. You know? If you like harem comedies, this one is one of the better ones, so check it out. Aoi Bungaku series. So this is another really interesting, and when I keep saying the word anthology show when I'm really just referring to shows that are about like individual character stories. This is an actual anthology show, because it's adapting like, I want to say 6 different classical pieces of Japanese literature. So the first 4 episodes is one arc of just adapting the book No Longer Human, which is a very famous novel, and I think also has a manga adaptation that's out in America now. But that adaptation it's directed by Morio Osaka, and the character designs are from the guy who did Takeshi Obata, the Death Note guy. It's a very interesting story, very beautifully told, like well written, well directed and everything. So like, yeah, it's a really cool one. And then it goes into a bunch of other stories. Some of them are like really short, like 1 episode. Some are like 2 or 3. And all of them are fascinating. Some are not good. They all have different directors, different writers. Like it's a whole different show each time. So like it's a real mixed bag. I think all of them are worth watching just for the intrigue alone, because they definitely go in some weird artistic directions, and some of the stories themselves are batshit insane. But yeah, give it a shot. I mean, the first 4 episodes at least are definitely worth watching as like a short OVA series. Mitsudo Moe. This is about 3 rambunctious elementary school sisters who get into comic hijinks and torture their teachers. It's definitely on the dirtier side, not really in a fan service way, but in a like scatological way. These little girls are fucking evil, and it's really funny. I thought this show was absolutely like outrageously funny when it wanted to be. There's definitely misses in there. There's definitely episodes or parts of episode that I didn't find funny at all. But when this show hits, it hits really hard. I'd probably give it like a 7 if it's as funny as I remember. If not, it might be a 6 or even a 5. Who knows? Arakawa Under the Bridge. This is a very charming and different kind of, anime comedy series. Like, tonally it's familiar, but it's about a guy who's a businessman who he accidentally like falls off a bridge and he's hanging by his tie, and this girl saves him, and because of some weird code of ethics he has to fulfill any wish of hers, and she asks him to come live under a bridge with her. So it's basically about these 2 homeless people living under a bridge with all these other homeless people, but they're all of course like weird wacky characters. One's a literal kappa, one's got a star for a head. All of them fantastic voice actors. Like a lot of my favorite voice actors are in this show. Tomokazu Sugita, Keiji Fujiwara, fucking the main character is the guy who voices Izaya. I don't remember his name right now. The voice of Araragi. Sakamoto Maya is the main character. Just a lot of great voice talent in this show. And yeah, it's just kind of a gag comedy thing, like I guess situational comedy, because it's like each, half episode is a joke. It's hit or miss, as most anime comedy is, but the characters and setting are so charming. There's 2 seasons, they're both equally good. They have phenomenal OPs. And it's a Shaft show, so it's got some weird visuals to it, Yeah, I'd probably give it like a 7. It's a very solid comedy series. Now we got Shiki, and people were asking me, how can you love Shiki when you always complain about shows being slow and boring? And Shiki is really slow in the early part, but I always found it intriguing all the way through because it's fucking weird. Like, the character designs are so weird, the tone of the show is weird, like, the first episodes feel like they're not taking themselves seriously at all. Like, even though it's this really slow, climbing, dark mystery show, it's also, like, goofy in a way. Like, it doesn't seem to treat its characters with much respect at the start, and, like, it seems almost tongue-in-cheek. And then as it builds and it starts to actually get scary, then it gets really scary, kind of because it's like it's lulled you into this false sense of security almost with how funny and like oddball it is. And then all of a sudden it gets really fucked up really fast. And then it becomes like the most fucked up show I can think of. And it's terrifying because of the messages it has about human nature. Like what makes this show freaky to me is like what it suggests about stuff like groupthink and just the way people act around each other. I mean, this is based on the Stephen King novel Salem's Lot. Like, I mean, the original, the book Shiki is a Japanese version of Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I've never read Salem's Lot, but what it reminds me of is Stephen King's other story, The Mist, which I have seen the movie of, and it's a lot like The Mist, in that, like, it's the breakdown of society that makes it scary, more so than the monsters. So yeah, it's fucked up, and I like it a lot. I'd probably give it an 8 or a 9 if I saw it today. Yojohan Shinwa Taikei, or, wait, I already have a score for this. Fuck Tatami Galaxy. Bigata HK. I thought this show was really charming and fun. The main character's got tons of personality and spunk. She kind of reminds me of the main character from Kodocha if she grew up to become a total slut. Maybe it's just the way that she's performed, but like her dream is to fuck 100 guys. That's her thing. Like she just wants to fuck every guy in high school and be the ultimate non-virgin. But the guy she ends up basically she's trying to fuck this nerdy dude because she sees him as like some easy prey, an easy virginal prey. But the process of trying to do that ends up like they constantly get interrupted, or she gets foiled, and they're kind of developing feelings for each other, so there's like a sweet romance undercurrent to it that pays off pretty well by the end. And I mean, the show's a little overly repetitive. It's not always funny. It has its moments. I'd probably give it like a 6. It's a good enough show. I just like the premise and how openly like sexual it is. I seem to have a soft spot for shows about girls who want to get laid. That seems to be my thing, is like when the girls actually want to fuck the main character, I seem to be into that. Gee, I wonder why. High School of the Dead. This is a show that I highly recommend watching Best Guy Ever's video about this show, because High School of the Dead is, I think, very underappreciated. Like, it's a very popular show, but everyone just regards it as, like, trashy popcorn shit, which it is, but it also, like, it does, it's really smartly written. Like, the characters are smartly written, the situation is engaging, and it has things to say, like, pretty obviously, if you ask me. I do think, though, that the show goes downhill as it goes, because it was an ongoing manga that, like, the anime doesn't really reach any kind of satisfying conclusion. And I think the second half of the show gets a little too dramatic and takes itself a little bit too seriously for my taste, whereas I preferred the early part where it was, like, much more of a crazy action fun time and, like, just dark, edgy shit happening all the time. And more focused on the characters and their development, which I didn't think was as strong in the second half of the show. So I'd probably give High School of the Dead like a 7, maybe even a 6, I don't know. I had it in that range before, but I definitely appreciate why Best Guy Ever likes the show even more than that, and you should check out his video about it. Kurage Hime, or Jellyfish Princess. This is a show I remember appreciating a good amount back when it came out. It's a like josei series about this young woman who moves into an apartment complex full of fujoshi. Everyone in there is a fujoshi, and they all have like weird things that they're obsessed with. But she, or maybe just they're just, I don't know if, I think she calls them fujoshi in the show, even though like none of them are really into like anime or anything like that. Like she's obsessed with jellyfish, is her thing. They all have like a weird thing. But she's just got no self-confidence, and she's like sort of just an outcast, and all these girls are outcasts, and they don't want anything to do with popular people, or like they can't communicate with people. But then she ends up meeting this cross-dressing boy. I don't think he's trans, so I'm gonna call him a cross-dressing boy. I hope that is still politically correct. But he like, and he considers himself male. He comes into her life, and he's like a very fashionable, outgoing person who's really nice, and like sort of starts changing the life of the main girl. I had remembered this being a pretty good show, but me and my girlfriend watched the first 2 episodes recently, and we were not very into it. Like, it's kind of very repetitive with its jokes, like from an early point. Like, a lot of the side characters are really one note and get really tired really quick. So while I know the show is about the development of the main character girl, and maybe it does a decent job of that in the middle episodes, the early episodes aren't that good, and I know the later episodes are very bad, because the production falls apart in the last few episodes and it has no ending. It just kind of stops, and the manga kept going. So I don't know if this show is as worthwhile as I once thought. I probably would end up giving it a 6 if I finished it now. But, you know, it still has a lot going for it. It's still a colorful, fun time. I just was let down with the 2 episodes that I've rewatched. Hodo Musko, meanwhile, is actually a show about trans issues. It's about a bunch of transgendered middle schoolers dealing with being trans, essentially, and like coming to understand their emotions and like sorting through their gender identity issues. Now, the anime series never really draws any conclusions about these things. It takes place over like a weird like vignette of the manga, because the manga starts off with all the characters in elementary school, and it goes all the way through, I think, high school. I haven't read the whole thing. I had read like from the start up through where the show goes before the show came out. The show starts in middle school, so there's already all this drama that's happened between the characters before the show even starts that you have to kind of tease out throughout the series. I just really like the characters in this show. I really like the aesthetic. I really like the fact that it's about transgender issues, which no other anime has really tackled with anywhere near the grace that this show has. And it's a really solidly written piece of work. I'd probably give it an 8 or a 9. I don't know. I have to watch it again. It's been a long time. But, you know, I've seen it a couple times, and I really appreciated it both times. Otome Yokai Zakuro. This is one of those, I don't even know, like, why I watched the entirety of this show. It's very much like a shoujo Ghostbusters show. Like, it's just about, you know, a bunch of, like highly Shinto-y, like, Japanese spirit kind of stuff, and they fight spirits or something. I don't even fucking remember. And it takes place in, like, the 50s. I barely remember this show. I don't know why I watched all of it, other than that it looked really pretty. I think even at the time I considered it like a 6 out of 10. I'd probably give it a 5 if I watched it now, and I wouldn't finish it if I watched it now, because I don't even know why I did in the first place. The World God Only Knows. I liked this show a good bit. It's about a guy who is the master of dating games, but he has no social life in real life, and then he has to apply his dating sim knowledge to the real world and woo a bunch of girls so that he can collect some kind of like heart gems or some shit for this Shinigami. It's really entertaining. It plays with the meta of the genre in a fun way. It's got some decent romance chops, some good comedy chops. I think it does its best when it's going full comedy. And it looks really nice. This was kind of during the Manglobe sellout era, where they were no longer doing really experimental, interesting shows, but like it showed that they could sell out well, like they could do a good manga adaptation. So, you know, I was into it, and I'd probably give it like a 7 or an 8 if I watched it again. Now we got Ori no Imoto ga konna ni kawaii wa ga kana. or Imo. My little sister can't possibly be this cute. Somewhat infamous show that my friends Best Guy Ever and Ben Saint consider to be the worst anime ever created, but they refuse to get into why because Nate's been working on like some thesis about it in the background. But in any case, I liked this show. Like, I have big problems with it. I think it's really inconsistent. Like, I think the biggest problem with this show is the fact that it secretly wants to be, or maybe even not secretly, it wants to be an Emoto show. Like, the thing about the series is that the most interesting parts of it were that it wasn't that kind of show. It wasn't, like, plot-wise, the plot does not suggest that this is a I want to fuck my little sister show. Like, the whole point was that she was a more realistic little sister who had problems with her brother, who they had a contentious relationship, but she's like this hardcore otaku in spite of being like an outgoing, preppy girl, which I think is a great character dynamic. I think she's entertaining as a comedy character. I can't take her seriously as a dramatic character. And then you've got Kuroneko, who's a really lovable character. Like, all the side characters are good. The general ideas of the show are good about this, like, fear of persecution for your hobbies. And it has some great episodes, but then it'll dip into, like, main guy falls on his sister's tits, and why is that in there? You know, like, oh no, wait, he actually is gonna fuck his sister by the end, isn't he? And then you go down that road and you're like, I feel like this has squandered what was interesting about this show. Not that I have any problem with brother-sister incest shows, it just was the opposite of the intrigue of this one. So, like, I'd probably give this season a 6, and I never watched season 2 because everybody told me it was fucking dog shit. But, like, you know, I really think it's a show that is confused about what's good about it. But it was lovingly crafted. I'll give it that. It's a really good-looking show with lots of interesting little things in it. Anyway, Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt. This is probably the show I most want to rewatch out of everything in my completed list that doesn't have a score. Because while I've talked about shows like Eureka 7 that I think I'll probably give a 10 and I really want to see it for that reason, Panty and Stocking has probably the biggest difference between what I thought of it before and what I think I will think of it now. Because I adore the aesthetic of this show. I love everything the director has ever done. You know, I love the whole idea of it. And at the time, I was not into scatological and sexual humor. Because this came out in 2008. I think, 2010? 2010, right? 2010? I'm looking it up. 2010. Because it was airing at the same time as My Little Pony Friendship is Magic started. It was, you know, at the time, I just wasn't that into, like, raunchy stuff or scatological stuff. I just saw it as gross. And now I love that stuff. Like, I'm way more into it than I was back then. I like stuff that just anything that's going against the grain and saying fuck you, which this show is in a big way. And I mean, not to say that I think all of it will be funny, because part of my problem with it before was just that I only thought half the episodes were funny. But, like, I think I'd find more of it funny now. I'm more into dry humor. I'm more into just weird shit, you know? I think I was just, I don't know, I wasn't into it before, but, like, everything I've seen of it since then has gotten me excited to watch it again. So I'm gonna predict that I will give this show an 8. Back then I gave it a 6. I think I'd give it an 8. We will find out when the time comes. Kore wa zombie desu ka? This is one of these, like, dumbass light novel adaptations that's actually pretty entertaining because it's so fucking weird. Similar to Index, but not as good as Index. It's a little bit trashier and a little bit stupider and more comedy focused, but, like, this is a show where it just piles on the cliches until the point it becomes absurd. Like, the main character is a guy who becomes both a zombie and a maso shoujo, which is like a maho shoujo, except it's a violence girl. So he has a chainsaw, but he also transforms into a magical girl. There's another girl who's a maso shoujo. There's a Dullahan girl. There's a vampire ninja. In fact, there's 2 vampire ninjas. And, like, and they're all on, like, a harem with this guy. But, like, the show is at its best when it's going either insanely over the top with the comedy or insanely over the top with the melodrama. When it's just being a fucking harem show, it's bad. So it's a mixed bag, but like if you watch it, episode 11, there's a scene where there's like a fight on Tokyo Tower, and like there's all these fucking vampire ninjas riding sky whales playing violins to like negate a magical shield by this other dude, and like it just, the stuff that's happening is so mind-blowingly fucking stupid that it's awesome. So I'd probably give that show a 6. Our comment to the Bridge Season 2, I feel the same way as I do about Season 1. And the last show we'll be talking about is Steins Gate. This is one of my favorites for a while. I love the dialogue in this show. I love the characters. I think they're all a ton of fun. I'm probably in a minority here, but I like the first 9 episodes of this show the best. Because the first 9 episodes are just establishing the sort of culture of this, like these nerds in Akihabara who are like obsessed with sci-fi and are like just doing this weird basement research trying to create sci-fi machines and accidentally succeeding. And like just the dialogue between them is so fun and witty, and the characters feel so real. Like that's what's weird about it, is that even though they're so over the top, they still feel like real, like, I don't know, autists in Akihabara. Like, I love watching these guys, and like that's the most fun part of the show for me, is just like getting to experience these characters. Once it gets into the story, it gets a lot more hype and like, oh shit, and like crazy stuff's happening, but I just really relished the time I got to spend with the characters. But I mean, that's what makes the other part of it work, is that I love these characters so much that seeing like what's happening to them, like seeing Okabe go through this ringer, is really painful, you know, and I really want him to succeed in the end. So overall, it's still a great show. I'd probably give it, I mean, at the time, I would have given it like a 9 or a 10. I'm going to say I'd still probably give it a strong 8 to a light 9. I don't know where exactly it would fall, but, you know, I rewatched episode 1 for my How to Recognize a Great Anime in One Episode video, and I had really enjoyed that episode, so I'm sure I'll still enjoy the show a lot. And, yeah, that's it for this one. See you next time when my voice doesn't literally hurt to talk. Peace.